Hello everyone and welcome to this video. It's going to be one of about three, I feel, that's going to help us get over that period where we're coming to the end of one year, we're coming to the end of our calendar year 2025 and wondering what 2026 has got for us. But in order to actually hear these things, you can go on the internet as much as you like and you can listen to different ministries and different prophets and what have you. Interesting and great. But the Lord wants you, He wants me to be perfectly positioned at this time so He can speak to us Himself. And then afterwards, we can compare with what other people are hearing because nobody, of course, has the whole picture. And these last days, I've been thinking, well, Lord, the holidays will soon be over. Life will will go on as before, or more or less as before. Depends on your point of view and what kind of a year you've actually had. But I kept hearing the Lord say, time to take off your sandals because we're entering holy ground. And as you won't need me to tell you, it's Exodus chapter 3, and it's the prophet Moses who's wandering on the backside of the desert, tending his father-in-law Jethro's sheep without a clue of what's going to happen. And I wondered about this. Do we recognize holy ground? Would we recognize it if it appeared in front of us? And would we be sensitive enough and not in so much a rush that we would do exactly what Moses did and go to investigate further? And we're entering, a holy space and where God is going to speak. And we need to recognize our burning bush and enter our holy space and take off our sandals. It might not be that we're on Mount Horeb, but certainly I know for many of the saints, we are going to be standing, walking on holy ground. And when God says, take your shoes off, take your sandals off, that is what we do in order to enter that sacred place. And I believe it's been individually tailored for each one of us, And I'll just read this to you. And you can use this as a kind of end-of-year meditation if you like. And Exodus 3 says, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. And so he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. And then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. And so when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. It's actually, God's doing something to grab Moses' curiosity. I don't know how many bushes there were at that time around, but they're not all burning, and not all of them refuse to be consumed by the fire. And here's some interesting points for you. The first thing, the word that's used for the desert is that word that in Hebrew means speaks. It's to do with speech, the organs of speech. And it's where God speaks and where we listen. In other words, there's a pause coming before we cross over into that next part of what the Lord wants to do in this day. And secondly, I looked up the word for bush, and it's a prickly thorn bush. Perhaps it's like a blackberry bush. You don't want to get caught in them, but normally they're quite dry, and if they caught fire, they'd certainly burn. But it made me think straight away that there's a link between the crown of thorns that was put on Jesus' head later on, and that should have been the end of him, that would have been humiliation. And those thorns then, I'm working on that because I know God's about to say something about this as well. And thirdly, it's not an ordinary bush, because not all bushes are burning like this, and not all bushes speak. But God is going to. The important thing, though, is God's trying to catch your attention. And this might be useful for some people, I think, who, like Moses, had kind of prematurely entered their calling. If you remember, I'm not going to read the whole story, you probably know it. If you don't, it's time you did know it. And Moses, of course, has been adopted by the Egyptian royal family. You know this story. And there comes a point when he realizes who he is. And of course, he finishes up murdering an Egyptian. You know, it's a bit like that series Traitors, isn't it, that we just had on British television. And he's been a traitor, very ungrateful towards the royal family that adopted him and brought him up as an Egyptian. So he's kind of messed up, and the whole reason he's at the backside of the desert is because he's messed up. But of course, he has seen his calling. It's just that it's been a premature one and not exactly the way that the Lord initially would have wanted, I am sure. So take heart if you're one that feels like you've been wandering in the backside of the desert and you've messed up your calling. It actually comes back when you're on the backside of the desert, when the season is about to change, and when the Lord is beginning to say, okay, you are on holy ground, take off your sandals. And he will try and do anything to get our attention, and he waits. I wonder if Moses hadn't decided to step aside and see this vision. I doubt the backside of the desert was that interesting, but something is going to grab our attention in this time. And in the end, of course, all that happens is that Moses does finish up by rescuing the people. And wow, there's going to be some mighty destiny for the Egyptians as well. We begin to see it even now. And God uses it to call people out of Israel. He used out of Egypt, I beg your pardon. And God used it to call his son out of Egypt. It's written in Matthew 2, verses 13, 14, 15. Out of Egypt I called my son. Hosea 11, verse 1 and the rest. When Israel was a child, I called him out of Egypt. So you can see this is happening again and again and again, that it's part of the maturing process. But we're crossing a threshold, and I've got a lot more I want to say about thresholds as well. It's time to be still and to listen. And there, of course, we hear the maturity of the call of the Lord on our lives. And I wanted to pray for those of you, perhaps you have messed up. I'd be very surprised if people here had a perfect calling and perfectly entered the maturity of their call. Mostly not. But if we are listening right now, even over these next few days and weeks, I feel the Lord will once again interrupt our desert, where we've been wandering perhaps for months or years, and we've perhaps given up, and suddenly there is a burning bush. And I'm praying you'll recognize yours wherever you are, and that you will turn aside, that you will be still before the Lord, that you will allow him to speak as you listen, and that we will hang around to hear the maturity of the calling that he has put upon so many lives at this time. So I pray that right now the holiness of the Lord would invade your desert, that you would see, that you would be intrigued, that you would step aside, that you would obey the Lord's command to take off your shoes, that you would go no further until you listen to him. And just feel the presence of the Lord now. And that holiness, that burning, that spirit of burning we're going to feel so much in the next months, would grab hold of you, and that you would enter in to a new, a more mature place of your calling with the Lord. Whatever has happened in your life, no matter how unpopular you'd perhaps made yourself be because you entered too soon into that calling. But don't give up, because 2026 is going to be a year when many are going to feel that call again. They'll realize what's going on, and they will answer that call of the Lord. Probably like Moses, they'll argue, but the Lord is calling. He's calling you out of your Egypt. He's calling you out of your desert, that you might fulfill the purpose for which you have been born. So let that holiness, that spirit of burning, grab hold of you. Recognize you're entering a holy place, a place that you don't recognize, but where you will hear the voice of your God, who certainly hasn't given up.